About a handsome little fox, let me sing you folks a yarn. Hey, diddle-dee, daddle-da, daddle-do, doodle-dum.
Wes Anderson's films have one of the most unique styles in all of cinema. His films all have this warmth and childlike excitement that is reminiscent of reading a children's book. How does he do this? Well, the first aspect we're going to look at is visuals. In his work, the sets are often arranged in such a way that it's hard not to look at every little detail that's packed into each scene. There is also lots of emphasis on colour, line, shape and texture. There is also lots of action going on in the margins and backgrounds of his scenes, so the audience's attention isn't just on the main subject of the scene. Anderson also seems to have an obsession with symmetry, but while he perfectly centres all of his shots. This makes all of his shots feel like paintings and is very reminiscent of analog film. These elements are perfectly shown off by the opening scene in Moonrise Kingdom. Notice how the camera doesn't cut and instead tracks through the house using whip pans and tracks. This makes it seem like the viewer is looking at everything taking place and not just individuals' actions. In other words, the camera moves independently and isn't dictated by characters' actions. This makes the audience feel like they are watching a whole environment. This is really alive and has many little stories happening inside of it. This is very similar to one of Anderson's major inspirations, J.D. Salinger, whose book, Catcher in the Rye, features a character with many different stories and events happening around him. Salinger also inspired Anderson's style of dialogue that feels like it's being read and not spoken, which again feeds into the idea that his films are like reading a children's book. Anderson's colour palette is full of warm pastel colours that feel like they're from a snapshot of the 1980s, along with the costumes, all in vintage style of the 1980s. All of this clearly shows Anderson's mindset when he's creating his films. See, he writes his films as if they're from the perspective of a 12-year-old version of himself. Not only this accounts for why everything looks childish, but also why the aesthetic remains in the 1980s, because that's when Anderson was a child, so he relates this period to his childhood.